Hello friends, followers and channel members, welcome back to another video here on the channel. A short video today, but one that I hope you find interesting as we look at various different optical illusions that you can experience when landing. Now, these optical illusions are real-world threats and something that real-world pilots have to be across so that they know what to expect and how not to get sucked into believing the picture they see out of the window. These false visual cues are usually more of a threat at night time when flying in the dark, but there are also a few optical illusions that can present themselves anytime, but when it's nighttime they become even more of a threat. I think it's also quite interesting that these false cues and visual illusions also present themselves in the world of flight simulation, so you probably don't know it yet, but you also may have been conned into believing a false picture out of the window as you've been flying in Microsoft Flight Simulator or any other flight simulator at home. It affects not just commercial aircraft but also smaller GA aircraft as well, so all pilots should hopefully get something useful out of this video. These threats also become more of a danger if the approach you are doing is a non-precision approach. If you've got an ILS instrument landing system to assist you, then you've got something to mitigate the false picture that you're getting out of the window. But if you're doing a non-precision approach or even a visual approach, then this is when they really can cause you a threat. So let's look at the first optical illusion, and this is probably the most well-known and the most common faced by pilots at night, and this is called the black hole effect. When flying during the daytime, you obviously have your peripheral vision, but you can also see all of the landmass and the surroundings of the airport, and more importantly the runway as well, helping you to gauge how far out you are and giving yourself good depth perception. Put yourself on the same approach at night though, and suddenly a lot of those key visual aids are removed, meaning that your spatial awareness can become compromised. You no longer have the same visual cues to help monitor your position in relation to the runway and the altitude and attitude that you are at. This effect becomes even worse when you're on approach to a runway at night when there is something like a body of water in front of you, a featureless terrain, so that all that you've got in the windscreen is the runway lights ahead of you. This is what is known as the black hole effect. It can lead pilots to thinking that they are high on the approach, and so to counteract that, the pilot will increase the rate of the descent to get down lower. Boeing studied this effect after some crashes of aircraft in the 1960s, putting really experienced pilots into this situation, and found that if they didn't keep a constant watch on their instruments, many of them flew approaches that were far too low and were dangerously close to hitting the ground before the runway. What makes this illusion even more of a threat is that a quick glance at your instruments won't necessarily correct the picture you have in your mind of the approach, unless you notice a rapid VS vertical descent rate. Now, most commercial airports have PAPI lights, the precision approach path indicator lights. Obviously, too white, too red is the perfect approach, so trying to maintain those on the way down is a great way to mitigate the fact that you may want to find yourself pushing the aircraft down lower because you think you might be too high. In fact, there are also some airports and airlines that will not allow approaches at night time on a non-precision approach if there are no PAPIs available. So there we go, that is the black hole effect, the first of our optical illusions we're going to cover in this video. The next then is another optical illusion that can cause the same effect, leaving the pilot to believe that they are too high and thus increasing the rate of descent to make the picture look as they're used to seeing. This then is the narrow runway effect, and of course this doesn't just apply to nighttime, but pilots can also fall foul of this during daylight hours. The pilot sees the runway ahead of them and it looks smaller than they're used to seeing, narrower, leading the pilot to believe that they must be high, so need to increase the rate of descent to get down lower to make the runway look the normal size that they are used to seeing. This, similar to the black hole effect, leads to a lower than normal approach, risking collision with terrain prior to the runway threshold. The normal width of a runway is about 45 meters. Anything lower than that can be considered a narrow runway for commercial traffic, as small as 30 meters being the minimums for most commercial aircraft. So what about wide runways? Well, some runways are as wide as 60 meters, and so yes, the same optical illusion applies, but in reverse. A big, wide runway makes the pilot think that they are lower on the approach than they should be, and so they arrest the rate of descent, meaning that eventually they actually come in higher than they should do and risk overshooting the landing touchdown zone. Now, your wider runways are usually found at the major international airports, such as on approach here at Milan, and the small, narrower runways you find particularly in Europe, usually around the Greek islands. Either way, the width of the runway can create an optical illusion, and if you think it's a bad thing during the daytime, imagine that at night, and also imagine that with the black hole effect thrown in there as well. Two huge threats that pilots should be aware of. There are other illusions as well, such as water refraction. Rain on the windscreen can create the illusion that you're flying at a high altitude because the horizon in your field of vision appears lower than it is because of the water on the windscreen. Runway slopes too can also cause a visual illusion. A downsloping runway can create the illusion that the aircraft is lower than it actually is, meaning that a pilot might be high on their approach in an attempt to combat the visual illusion that they are seeing. The opposite of that is of course also true. An upsloping runway can create the illusion that the aircraft is higher than it actually is, meaning the pilot might find themselves lower on the approach trying to get that picture as he wants to see it. So all of these are threats that pilots need to be aware of when they're on approach to an airport. So it's always worth making sure that you look at things like the width of the runway and knowing the terrain that you are about to encounter when you're on final approach, so that you can have this in your brief and in the back of your mind, knowing that ahead of time, if any of these threats are there, you're going to be able to mitigate them. If you're on an ILS approach, of course, it becomes much easier. Visual approaches and non-precision approaches, that's where the key is to focus on the PAPI lights and keep a quick eye on those instruments just to make sure that you're not falling into a trap. So guys, thank you so much for watching. I do hope that you have found this useful. Of course, if you've got any questions or if you'd like to leave any comments on the video, then please do so down below. I do love reading all of them, even if I don't get a chance to respond to them personally. If you have enjoyed this video, then please don't forget to leave a like. And if you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications bell so you don't miss any future videos and our live stream flights as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you all in the next one. Bye bye for now.